Y'all already know what it is. Same rules apply. Don't contact them. And no children. Now let's get into this shit before I fucking lose my brains.
Now this is gonna be a different type of video than what I did with New Guy. The details that I researched and found while I looked through this story myself, and what I will be presenting and rebuking and responding to today, may not be as interesting or be as important to the news story itself as you might find it. So, in preparation to help you keep just the facts and everything else separate, I have these timestamps for each and every one of you who simply want to know what happened and why you should care, and for everyone else, you can jump to those timestamps as well if you want to skip ahead to the pieces and parts and hear about what I think when I get down on the details of the story. And as for everybody else who wants to watch through it all the way through, see you. I respect you. And I love you. Mwah.
Meredith, Sally, Kelly, Bridget, Angelica, Angie, Carol, Natalie, Alva, Janet, Vanessa, Denise, and even the most occasional good-natured Pab. No matter the field of industry, racial or class boundary, to every culture, every walk of life, and to every person, unanimously recognizes the pattern of the most dangerous threat to any HR department and any employee's sanity. The Karen. Despite the many stereotypes, mutations, and phylums of this passive-aggressive busybody, the Karen is the most common form of this species of exasperated, loud-mouthed individual. While Karen behavior is exhibited most often by women and minorities, Karen tendencies can manifest themselves in anyone, anytime that pettiness is involved. The most common trait being a pathological need in order to have the last laugh over a potential victim, as well as attempting to search for any way to be a victim in a situation, and most often losing their shit at any random passerby that would be observing their behavior and would ever dare to laugh at them, even when they know themselves are in the wrong. Such common statements, behaviors, actions, tells, and all situational behavioral matters that can be recognized in or during and after a Karen pouncing can include and are not limited to the following.
You're cute too.
I'm sorry, really sorry.
You are?
No, it's my fault.
It is your fault.
Yeah, I know it's my fault. That's why I'm saying sorry.
She thinks it's cute that her driver almost hit my kids, and she thinks she needs to take a video of it instead of apologizing like a saint.
So stopping in the middle of the road is gonna help?
You being a bitch is gonna help?
I didn't say.
I don't know. Calm down. Calm down.
It's okay, I'm sorry.
He apologized.
It's my fault.
He apologized.
Yeah, I know.
And you know what? That didn't upset me. But the bitch ass hoe
Sorry.
that told me
Bitches.
to calm down. What I'd like you to do is apologize instead of being a bitch.
You're calling me sorry, but you're calling me a bitch. So set an example.
I'm sorry. My kids can't hear me calling you a bitch.
Your window's open.
They can't hear me because they're listening to Kids Bop. Attitude
It's
sucks
okay.
dick.
Okay? Ma'am, once again, ma'am.
I said both of you.
No, you said sir. Once again, it's ma'am.
I actually said both of you guys. It was a general.
Right beforehand, you f***ing said sir.
Sir? Okay.
Mother.
Contrary to stereotype, male Karens do exist, but they are rare, due to the fact that nobody really takes them seriously, and most people tend to ignore them when they speak in general. The other telltale signs of this personality disorder come in the form of the person attempting to shame the individual worker, staff, or business in question when attempting to fleece said business, staff member, or individual into expectation of a free and or discounted product or service, or attempting to emotionally manipulate a person to sympathize with them so that they can feel superior in the moment, so they can avoid all and any responsibility that comes from the gasket that they just blew in public around all of these people. Since, in the mind of a Karen, they are always vindicated and are even empowered to do so, because the idiom, "the customer is always right," warps any and all responsibility, accountability, and general common sense and shame into a bastardized worldview and ultimately victimized excuse that justifies any and all of the impending verbal abuse that any person, including retail workers, the common prey of a Karen, most of all, have to be expected to tolerate and to surf the emotional labors of dealing with, because they know that they will suffer ultimately no ramifications or burden with any kind of retaliation, at least in the moment, most of the time. It is because of this social dynamic, and despite the fact that it is built upon and has become the butt of many jokes, the Karen can still hold a significant amount of power over the working class, over a regular day individual, and depending on where you find them, even over you in a field like that, such as I, who is a streamer, because they can have a significant amount of power over public perception and over the general reaction of the eventual angry mob that they will try to ring up to justify their behavior so that they can save face. It is very common for anyone to roll their eyes at this attention-seeking behavior and this victim-worshipping dogma, because the inherent belief of it is that they are justified in their behavior for it. Therefore, it is natural for one to say, "And so you should help me." Such as a Karen walking into a retail business, trying to fleece the customer position with a expired coupon, the worker actively recognizing this coupon is expired, you can't use this, and the Karen saying, "I ain't never heard no shit like this, you need to do what I said, I've been here for years." The expectation is that they will be able to get away with it, and when this behavior is seen in public, especially by a group of other people, it is normal to laugh at it, because it is deserving to be mocked. And as it is deserving to be mocked, there are also some cases where people do not understand that this is hard to recognize, except when everybody eventually, all at once, snap into equal collective and do. Enter David. Make no mistake, David is a male Karen. He's so much more than that. David Levitt is a well-known internet tough guy, an internet bully, and a clout-chasing troll who will regularly tweet out anything controversial in an opportunistic fashion to get attention. He's also a repeat offender and a liar. Now, this one in particular is just the thousandth time of this individual on record being caught doing solely this, and strictly into employees of working class businesses, regularly tweeting out on his social media and targeting both the businesses in question, the people in question, and using his platform to plaster their names in their face for everyone to see as he mocks and shames them for not immediately doing what he wants. Not only did he have the audacity to get the police involved in the case of this lady.
Hello, dispatch, Officer Stone.
Hi, this is not an emergency at all, but I'm at the Target in Swansea trying to make a purchase, and they have it advertised as a price, and they're not honoring the price, and the store manager is saying that they can't honor the price, and I showed them the Massachusetts government website that says that they have to honor the price that's listed in the sign.
Yeah. So, I mean, if they're not honoring it, I mean, there's nothing that we're going to be able to do. If they don't want to honor it, you'd have to probably go to like the Better Business Bureau or something along those lines.
It says it on the Massachusetts.gov website for retailers that they have to honor, that it's the state law that they have to honor the price listed on the sign.
Okay. All right, we'll send an officer. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an emergency, so there's no rush. I tried asking them multiple times to honor the price.
Okay. All right, we'll send someone over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And as you might expect, much like anti-anime types on Twitter, when they quote the CSEM laws to artists and not safe for work individuals on the internet, especially on Twitter, he didn't read it twice, and he didn't read it slowly. Immediately, every user from every side of the internet, they turned their heads to witness the absolute display of this absolute unit. And all banded together on the power of social media to rightfully give David the coward's reward. Except it wasn't the 15 minutes of fame that he wanted as he imagined it. Apolitical, communistic, extreme far, and potentially everything in between. The entirety of social media, especially Twitter, came down on the head of Levitt, with only the most devout of followers, the most stupid of cultists, supporting him and them and going down with David in the ship. It is because of this, Carpe Duncan set up a GoFundMe drive for TargetTori to be able to take a well-deserved vacation and put all of this nonsense behind her, reaching out as to give her at the time of this recording a whopping $30,000 and climbing, because the GoFundMe link is still active and be able to find it if you just look up GoFundMe TargetTori, so that she could be able to then, what she chose to do, which was to donate the money, potentially and hopefully not at the ADL. And despite the fact that Tori is the unmistakable victim in this situation, there is a very select few of people who do not believe that Tori deserves the outreach. And, all things considered, whether or not you are for or against the decisions that Tori has chosen to make with the money, it all adds up effectively to sour grapes and to a unmistakably kind of happy ending. Kind of. Oh, now for the kinda. I say kinda here, because for many people, this would be where the news story and for the video for them ends, and you would be right. David remains locked and is a laughingstock to this day, especially since he didn't read the law which he was citing. But something about this, and about the many people who came to shit on David and his behavior, didn't sit right with me. And I have now realized the reasons why they don't sit right with me. Because while many people are able to recognize Karens for who and what they are, which is emotional bullies who can choose to torture other people and make them feel small so that they can cover up their own insecurities that they have about themselves, very few people were able to recognize and call out what David is doing for what it is and by the name which it should have been called, which is public shaming and cancel culture. Now, I understand. I can feel the exasperation out of people who'd really get tired of this topic, but there's no way around it. It's been the new hotness. Government officials, celebrities, and companies publicly shaming audiences and individuals that they've interacted with, both personally and privately, on social media, insisting that anyone that doesn't agree with their opinion on the news, or in a social policy, or by a business decision, chooses to do so because they are either sexist, or racist, or a chud, or a bigot, or a secret undercover dog-whistling Nazi that needs to be shamed and mocked because clearly if they have a problem with your opinion, it's because they hate you, not because they disagree with you, politely or not. What's worse is there are even some people who imply or outright say very loudly, not saying the quiet part at all quiet, that people are just plain uneducated. And they're even wrong about recognizing what public shaming and cancel culture is and what it looks like, and thus, as the enlightened ivory tower class, deign to tell you, me, us, what is and who is not a victim. You know, like the fiefdom they take us for. If you believe cancel culture is real, name some folks who have been cancelled. So unsurprisingly, many folks have a different definition of what cancelled means. Kevin Hart is not cancelled. Billy Bush is not cancelled. Dave Chappelle is not cancelled. Are there non-famous or well-known folks who have faced consequences far beyond what they deserved? No doubt. I'm not stating anything new here, but it's clear the word has lost meaning as people use cancel liberally and jokingly. Also, the people saying Bill Cosby were cancelled, he's a rapist! Also, the people, including some of my friends, criticizing me for my first tweet, which was literally intended to gather names and not make assumptions. Wow. Ordinary folks who don't have fame and money and to insulate themselves are the ones who really get cancelled and deal with significant consequences. Doesn't cancelled mean the consequences outweighed the crime? Or that the person didn't deserve consequences at all? I'm asking earnestly what people think. It sounds nice. And it sounds like it's a good take, right? Who would get upset about that? It's the ultimate political tweet. And it would be nice, and it would be a good take if it wasn't for the fact that Yashar is lying out of his fucking ass. In fact, not only is he lying out of his ass, he lied out of his ass and then attempted to cover up his own involvement by hiding the replies and tweets in question when his own behavior by his own group of people got called out to him, and chose to outright pass over the people and not acknowledge a single person who was called out in this exchange. Ever. At no point in time. There was no tweet that was made. He didn't even try. Now, did Yashar answer to any of these? Did he delete the thread and take responsibility for his own involvement? Did he correct himself and say later that this was something that he didn't have all the information on, that he's changed his viewpoint on, and now he's been able to change his definition? Hell no! Not only did Ali cover up his own instances of all of those people he's responsible for doxing, he's responsible for harassing, and he's responsible for canceling, either as the leader of the mob or by one of the many journalists in the mob, you know, as a New York Times writer. Not only did he not mention it, not only did he not do anything to make himself responsible, not only did he cover it up, he completely ignored it because he was called out by date, he was called out by name, and he was called out by time, especially by the people who he had a responsibility in doing it to. And he instead just muted the tweet and ignored it like it didn't exist. And he's not the only one who's guilty for doing this. Cody Johnson! Y'all know Cracked, right? This guy's face? You're familiar with him, yeah? Another one of the comedic writers that got canceled from the video department on Cracked when they had to let all of them go. Someone who made an entire video on the topic of the subject, and we're gonna get into it. He piled in to get his punches in on David. Before we get into it, let me start off by saying, number one, this is under the purpose of fair use, because I need to criticize the point, and the only way to do that is to show the content of the video, so that I can reference why I think it's wrong. And two, because there's going to obviously be some people, either on Twitter or on the video, who are going to try and claim it, regardless of him claiming that it's a comedy video, I can comment on whether or not I think the comedy of the joke is both shit or not, and whether or not the logic and the context behind said joke is actually based on reality, and the people in the audience who are cringing in thought of having to see a Cody Johnson video. I'm sorry, but you watched this far into the video, you kind of signed on to this one, so let's get into it! The most important detail that I'm pointing out to you, and why I felt that it was so necessary to take the time to go over this, and the reason it irritated the shit out of me enough to make content about it, is because they're not mixing up the terms and words. No. Both of them get explicitly clear with what they claim is and is not what is supposed to be viable. Cody gets even more specific, and he calls it out specifically by word and name.
Social media, digital photos, better record keeping, and the internet in general have created a situation where everyone's past is going to be painfully available. And as millennials grow older, we'll have to figure out how to deal with that and what the forgiveness process will be. It's extremely complicated and distressing to think about. But it often seems like the large canopy of the cancel culture phrase often makes it hard to address, which is why I'm really gonna hone it in. I'm not talking about a bunch of people dogpiling some rando for saying dumb shit on Twitter that never would have gotten attention had someone pointed it out. I'm talking about famous people, comedians, entertainers, being canceled or fired from jobs or gigs because someone dug up an offensive statement or tweet or photo from their past. That is, after all, why we're using the word cancel, and why any recent article about the subject is specifically talking about people like Shane Gillis or that Justin Trudeau fellow from Up America with all the trees.
I think the juiciest parts for both Yahar and for Cody is that they explicitly say, just as he did and as he's going to later, that no, they're not talking about people like Tori. Because the key thing to remember here is that David was not a case of, oh, well, everybody saw a guy being an asshole on the internet, so they just came to Tori's rescue. That's not exactly how it played out. David was known for doing this. This is actually his 17th time on record within the last 6-month period of doing this explicitly and not having deleted the tweet immediately afterwards. This is just what we know of, that I was able to find myself through the amount of time I've had to study the topic since it happened. There's more. There are more people. There are more people that this has happened to by David's hands, and there are more people for whom this happens to on a regular basis, every single goddamn day. It's a bit like the Judge Dredd problem. There's X amount of crime, and there's only 3% of it which you can respond to. And of course, with the nature of social media and how easy it is for angry mobs to be ripped up into a goddamn frenzy by people like Yahar, and easily pacified by snake oil salesmen like Cody, of course it would go unmissed. And of course, they would change the words and the tactics and the definitions of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and what is viable and what is not viable, and what is regular and what is not regular. Because on top of moving the goalposts, this is easily redefining the terms to win an ideological argument. A person wouldn't do this. Any person can recognize there is no difference between what happened to Zami and what happened to Tori. Regardless of whether or not you think somebody deserves harassment, it is not okay to sit there and then say, oh no, what happened to you is not, it's completely fine because you don't have money and you're not of the working class, therefore I have no reason to cape for you, so screw you. It's, hating the rich is not the same as caring for the poor. And sadly for both Cody and Ali, they have yet to actually figure this out, which is why it's much easier for them, rather than defend their ideas on the spot and continue to define by their own principles what is and isn't allowed, to simply just let the shit slide into the memory hole. Let's let people forget. Because people don't pay attention. They'll be outraged about something next week, or next month, or next year, or in the next hour, or in the next minute. Because that's just how it goes. That's the meta. as it were. The media knows it. The legacy media, clickbait media knows it. Ali himself knows it because he is a contributor to places like the New York Times and Huffington Post. Cody knows it, having been a part of Cracked, and Crack had long since copied the metrics and the tile and the tactics of the Waypoint sites and of the Gizmodo sites, so that's not shocking. But what really is shocking is for them to really just say the loud part loud. That's the really shocking part. The other shocking part is the thing that he says next, later on in it, when he attempts to get people to ease themselves into this.
You know what also helps with this stuff? Apologizing. And I mean, like, not just saying, I'm sorry if anyone out there was offended, but seriously, broad, get thicker skin. But, like, actually apologizing. Because a lot of the reason someone like Shane Gillis got canned has to do with the way he handled the scandal after the fact. Showing that he didn't have what it took to deal with the heat. Or that he stuck to his principles and was like, no, the casual racial slurs were pushing boundaries. This is my fight song. I won't apologize. And SNL was like, okay, we're a cowardly institution and we want money, so bye. Even the Washington goddamn Examiner recognized this fact while still managing to pretend cancel culture in general is a problem, which it really isn't, but whatever. Apologies matter. So many people who complain about cancel culture and our society's lack of forgiveness forgets that. Jonah Hill did a pretty good one. Dan Harmon super apologized. Even Justin Bieber understood the very basic steps needed for an apology. Do you forgive them? That's up to you. But they apologized in a seemingly sincere way, recognizing what they did wrong and why it was wrong, and they continued with their careers, uncanceled. Because a lot of the time, that's all a company and the public needs to hear. We want to forgive these people. It literally took 2 racist scandals over the span of 4 years for us to cancel Mel Gibson, who continues to work in movies and is in fact not canceled. Remember that Kevin Hart Oscar story? He literally just had to apologize and didn't. That's why he wasn't the host. Not because of cancel culture, but ego. The refusal to own up to basic consequences. The brazen pride in not progressing with the times, which again, is fine. But you can't also whine about outrage culture, because, I don't know if you figured this out yet, it's not a thing. It's a myth. O.J. Simpson has 900,000 Twitter followers. Donald Trump bragged about groping women and became a president?
Bitch, you're gonna have to miss me with all that shit, cause what you just said was a fucking lie. First off, Kevin Hart did apologize, and he was still not forgiven for an explicit period of time. And in fact, it exists in the exact same paradigm that most apologies exist in, especially considering when Felix Schellberg would apologize and would be held responsible profusely for an inevitable period of forever and a day when the media chose to lampoon and attack and blast and mock and shame and insult him nonstop because of, well, take your fucking pick. When the Wall Street Journal chose to slander him, which then led to him losing his YouTube Red series, regardless of how shit YouTube Red is. When he was singled out and targeted as being responsible for harassment towards T-Series, when he was held out to be responsible for general harassment and toxicity, not just because of the climb to 100 million subscribers, but also because of the regrettable bullshit from the Australian Lions and Christchurch, but basically anything that he can be blamed for, because much like last time I reported on the news, it is one of the things that is commonly held to lean on, especially when it's a person that's well hated by a specific sect of political lines. It does not help to apologize to the mob, because the mob does not want to hear your apology. See, the mob wants to forgive people who they believe is on their side, which is whomever is doing what they want. And any person with a brain knows this. So that's bullshit. The other part about that is that there's a difference between apologies, behind apologetics. You know, the political kind of apologetics of coming out, having a planned statement, looking the part, doing everything they want you to do. Because I talked about this, actually. Jay Longbone had a thread on her reply to what happened and the conversation about it. And I chimed into it, and I'm going to repeat what I said here. I'll throw it up here somewhere on the screen. But the apologetics of mob assault and harassment is not for you, the audience member. It's not even for me. It's not for the person that's being attacked. It's not for the mob. It's for the people who report the news. The mob apologetics is a form of subjugation. It is a legitimate form of... I said fiefdom earlier, but it is like a literal king denouncing to a peasant to kneel and beg and genuflect for their life. It's an unironic kind of the worst kind of abuse that you could put on a person. Because it comes not from the person wanting to apologize, but being in fear and also knowing that this is what should happen. There is no argument. It is not something that you're supposed to stop. You're supposed to set down your arms. You're supposed to get in front of the firing squad. You're supposed to read your pre-approved statement by your stenographer. You're supposed to admit that you accept any and all parts of your sentence and trialing, and that instead of actually apologizing, you give people a pre-approved message that they will eat up and say, oh, well, you see, they apologize, so that's okay, it makes it better. No, that's not a real apology. Which is the reason why the media, the ones who choose to accept who is and who is not, including the pundits on whatever talk show, daytime or late night, take your pick, they're all shit, that do this, they're the ones who decide if a person is forgiven or not. Because if they don't do the rounds, if they don't go in front of the mob, the daytime mob or the late night mob, or the woke scold mob, Twitterati's on Twitter and social media all over, the journalists who slander them in the same breath that they say, come on, I'm just trying to help you. Those people who do not commit themselves to their Heraclean labor task for being forgiven will never be forgiven. And if they had no reason to forgive you in the first place because you're taking something away from them that they want, like Felix, for being a man who chooses not only to be responsible for himself, but also chooses to take away the weapons that the media can attack him with by cutting himself away from social media, since it's all bullshit anyways, because he chooses to not play the game, which is the smartest thing you could do. They want him destroyed. That's really it. You won't bend the knee, so they will cut your legs off and make you bend. And because you do the one thing that they can't do anything about, which is you remove yourself from the cycle, and you make it impossible for them to target you, except for the slander that they throw through the libel they put in press, makes them angrier, makes them target you more. The only real option is to not play. Because real apologetics, real sincere genuflection of behavior, even if you know that you were in the wrong and you had no intention on apologizing anyway, real apologetics, at least even the most fake version of it, which we see all the fucking time, especially from celebrities, especially from political celebrities. The real kind of sincerity of an apology, it's not for someone to broadcast. There's actually a very good example that just happened. Lilith got misgendered in the Daily Dot article. The person who wrote the article was called out by her by name on Twitter. Instead of doubling down, which the medias want to do, especially clickbait media, rather than taking the weak sauce answer out and just printing either a retraction or tweeting out a retraction that would not get as much traction as the original article printed out itself, because it was pointed out to Lilith by her audience, and she took it upon herself to do what would be natural in the situation and defend herself like a ferocious tiger and hunt them using their own tactics against them. Because the person in question saw reason and was willing to commit the Heraclean labor of reaching across and taking responsibility for their actions, saying, you know what, I fucked up. I could have tried harder. I didn't do my part. I'm sorry. And not broadcasting it on social media, but taking the step to do it in private. That is real apologetics. When you fuck up, and you know you fucked up, you don't hide it. The reporter in question, I'm not saying their name because I don't want them to be harassed. If you know the situation and you know what happened, you already know. And you don't bother contacting them about it either, because the matter's already settled. They don't deserve to be dogpiled for this any more than they already had been in the situation, especially considering once the situation was clarified and all things were made right, any anger really to be had dies down once they've already admitted the fault. But the point that I'm trying to get to is, real apologetics is an apologetics that is laid out very clear. A person who has reason to apologize and truthfully believes the words that they're saying, they're not going to project that shit out into the world until that they know that they have genuflected upon what they have done that is wrong. Andy Signor did this. Jared Nabokanacker did this. Can't really think of anybody else on the spot right now. Not coming to the head. There are others that have done this. Felix himself, PewDiePie, did this. There are other people as well who did apologies recently, or tell-alls about this recently, that when they were in the wrong, they apologized and pointed out where they were 100% in the wrong. But real apologetics, the real sincere shit, that good shit that hurts you, they hit you right here, you don't get that unless you want to. Kevin Hart didn't want to apologize because he knew that it was some bullshit. Kobe Bryant, God rest his soul, he had a moment on the court where he said some real sly shit to a ref. And regardless of my fucking position of how much I hate GLAAD as a company, and as a business, and as advocates, he did the steps. He apologized and changed his behavior. Busta Rhymes is another good case. He used to be very big against the rainbow sexuality back in like the 90s. And leading into it now with the generation of artists like Frank Ocean, doesn't exist anymore. It continues on and on like that. There are plenty of perfectly wholesome examples, and I'm pretty sure people could leave some. If you know of one that I didn't name off the top of my head, leave it in the comment section below if you got this far. But the point of just how wrong Cody is, and how wrong Ollie is, especially to suggest that you should apologize to the fucking mob, is that the mob doesn't want your apology. They want you dead. They want your digital corpse. They don't want something that does not make them outraged, because they don't want your apology. They don't want to solve the problem. They want to be mad. If people who want to be mad have no ventured reason to ever listen to your apology unless you are giving them what they want, or giving them a juicier target than yourself. Even when this happened to me, I had nothing to fucking apologize for. Not only was I not fucking wrong, and not only was it something that everybody well know about the person in question, which this happened to. If you don't know, you should watch this video in question. It was very, very blatant, point cut and dry case. But this is one of the overlapping parts that I think is important. about cancel culture, and especially about Karenisms and Karen behavior and Karen tendencies and clout-seeking behavior that's done specifically to cry wolf about something. A person who does shit like this, who decides what is and what isn't acceptable, what is and what is not viable, what is and what is not an example, they're full of shit. It's not my place as not as a crowd member, but it's not my place as, I guess you could call me a reporter. I'm not sure what I am. News personality? It's not my place as a news personality to decide whether or not something is or is not a case example of cancel culture if it is something that is nuanced. For example, a streamer choosing to single a person out because they chose to get mad and use their power to get somebody ejected from a convention because they didn't like them, or to use their power and position on a panel to claim something for attention, to cry and A-log in public. It's those examples. It would be my place to say no, no, get out of here. But when it comes to something like someone has evidence, not only do they have evidence that they can supply it on the spot, they produce the evidence, all evidence shows that it is 100% that thing, you don't get to come up and say, well, come on now. Are they rich? That's not how that works. It's just not how it works. You're fucking wrong all the ways around. It's unacceptable. It's actually disgusting that you would suggest otherwise. But I'm rambling at this point, and I think you get the point. So I'll try to summarize my point. You know, TLDR this shit, in case you made it this far and you just wanna slap it on an old knee and call it a day. The problem, the whole shell of what I find wrong about Yasar and about Cody is that both of them are acting like fucking weasels when they say shit like this. There's more in the video. If you haven't watched it yourself, try to at least tolerate it long enough to get all the way through. But the main topic, the main idea behind both of them is they both say cancel culture is good, actually, because it's not actually that big of a deal, you snowflakes. You know, the look at how mad you are situation. Whether it comes to people like Shane Gillis and, you know, whoever's next on the chopping block of the big old mob, they are always going to decide who is and who is not viable and who is and who is not a victim. And you should not let them. Fuck them. You know, if you have common sense, you know, and you have your own ability to judge. Use your judgment. Decide for yourself if you want to forgive someone. Not just a political figure, not just an entertainer or a content producer. People in your life. Especially this. This is very important. If you use this in your life. You have the ability to decide for yourself whether or not you want to be gaslit by someone who may or may not care about you. And you have the ability to tell if what they have to do and what they have to say to you, if a person chooses to apologize to you, if they are responsible for some shit that has really affected you, if they should be forgiven. Don't let people manipulate you. Don't end up like our boy Aaron Youngie, who tried to help Zoe Quinn and only ended up getting himself barred from being able to ever publicly respond to her for a set period of time, only to get slandered and lied about in the press. Don't be that guy. And most importantly, when shit like this happens, take it upon yourself. Use your common sense. Archive it. Sit down. Hold on to it for like a day or two. And watch how that person acts. How that reporter behaves moving forward. See whether or not you can tell for yourself if they're really out there doing their part and truthfully upholding what should be basic human logic. Or if they're just, you know, hoping that they can keep their head down for the mob. I honestly don't know really how to end this video, so I'm just gonna give you a rant of mine that I recorded semi-lucidly, and I'm gonna leave it at that. I have a thing I got to go do, including taking one long hot shower so I can get every single bit of Johnson out of my skin. So, if you made it this far, mazel tov. I'll see you guys next time. Mwah. Have a good day, everyone. Ah, shit. Work this out my nook and crannies.
See, the problem that I constantly have with people who choose to try to define what cancel culture is that they never actually truly define what it is. They say what it isn't, and whom it cannot be done to, and the conditions in which it is applicable, whether or not the person in question is even guilty of the thing in part and parcel. Cancel culture is not a thing that is a rigid checklist of, are they of the middle class? Yes, no. Are they a person getting money? Yes, no. Cancel culture, to briefly and kind of paraphrase Jay Longbone, is that it is a very stringent culture. It is an environment which is cultured by a group of individuals to make the action, behavior, and constant cyclical nature of being abusive towards each other by attempting to cancel one another normalized and acceptable as a part of polite society. The highest form of anything inside of cancel culture itself and inside of the call-out nature of it is like watching two K-pop stan cammers ask each other what their pronouns are while they are canceling each other. It is the most extreme form of the most indoctrinated and most it is the most stringent form of indoctrination and of domination a person can be subjected to. It is a scarlet letter. It is not just a scarlet letter, it is a scarlet letter which immediately shields the accuser behind a field of privilege that allows them to tell everyone either a truth or a lie. Completely, unabashedly, without consequence. Because before anyone realizes, or even cares to investigate, the honesty and the validity of the accusation, they have either already positioned themselves into the anonymous crowd, or they disappear into the fucking wind, never to be seen or heard from again, until it becomes politically expedient and financially lucrative to do so, to tell their story, to reveal their truth, their side of history, without ever actually realizing that the people who most often use cancel culture are the same people who are demanding to have the right and the privilege to define what it is. The reason why Ishara and Cody are both guilty of this is because both of them choose to go out of their way to very specifically and stringently define that cancel culture is supposed to be a thing that they are apparently against, but very clearly in their own actions and in their own predefinitions, and in being called out themselves by their own colleagues, are 100% guilty of either, in Cody's case, redefining and creating the checklist by which one would be labeled as being guilty of, and thus required to accept the terms of their execution, or in Ali's case, completely denying and attempting to take a moral high ground by saying the quiet part quiet and the loud part loud when it is time to do so on social media, but clearly not living their honest opinion and saying the quiet part loud behind closed doors. Both of them continue and perpetuate the idea of cancel culture without ever saying a single word to show and deny how cancel culture is, or works, or functions, because they intentionally choose to muddle what cancel culture is. Sitting in front of a camera and even attempting to joke and lie and say that cancel culture is not about and is not real because reasons, it's not even close to getting to the truth of the matter. Because when you choose to sit down in front of a camera and say, it's not cancel culture, when a person gets called out over something stupid, yes, it can be, and most often is. A person making a tweet and choosing to destroy someone's life over something that quite literally is then proven as fabricated once a person sits down and thinks about it. Because that's just the cytogenesis nature of referencing. Or to sit in front of a camera and say it's only cancel culture when the person who is being canceled loses everything with no opportunity and chance to return. Regardless of whether or not the person in question is likable, and regardless of whether or not you think the canceling of said person is good or bad, the fact that a person, from one angle, like Count Dankula, could be canceled, is not better or less or greater or more equal to the canceling of Milo Yiannopoulos. Because both are wrong. Both should have been done. Doesn't matter what you think of either one, and of their ideas, their comments, or their politics. It's equally fucking wrong, and shouldn't fucking happen. And yet, we realize, as we study and watch how it gets used, and who chooses to then define when it is acceptable to do so, that as much as a person would choose to point a finger and say that it's solely the left or it's solely the right, it's very clear that it's not. It's something which people who predate themselves and choose to predate power itself choose to do. It's what a person with a massive ego chooses to do. When a person holds up an individual who is constantly slandered and smeared, like Felix Schellberg, PewDiePie. And on the other hand, you hold up a person who, by every single monicum, and every single degree, and every measurement, whether it be an internet person or an outright boomer, takes an individual like Onision. In the other hand, between Felix and Gregory Jackson, the media and people in it who choose to create and cultivate the very culture which they claim to not want to see, but have no problem in partaking in, and then redefining in order to alleviate themselves of the emotional weight of the consequences for their actions, will hound Felix till the ends of the earth, even announcing what he very clearly defines as a break from the medium from which he is popular for, as acquitting. And on the other hand, not a single fucking word of coverage, except the facts on how and where and why and what Gregory has done over the course of his career. One could even have the opinion, as I've seen, to go off on the internet and say that it would be good for Onision to be cancelled, or any of the things that would be done. Because in truth, cancel culture is no different than the modern day age form of an execution. A modern day lynching, one could call it. It is the purest form of democracy. A pitchfork, torch-wielding, angry mob, roaming from house to house, informing the masses. Did you know? Did you see? Did you hear about the news? That man, he committed an oopsie. It's time. We have to hang him. There's no other choice. There's nothing else we can do. It's just, we need to do it. If you don't do it, well, who knows? You might find a noose around your neck next. From doorstep to doorstep. The only difference now is instead of a fiefdom and people living in a village hoping to hang someone that they consider of power and authority over them, terrorizing them, say a king or a lord, now it's a digital doorstep, knocking from profile to profile to profile amongst the community, amongst the masses, the pitchforks and the light itself being the hashtag. And the judge and juries and executioners that sit upon the bench of the kangaroo court is none other than the journalists that created the mob, the celebrities that choose to support the mob, the ones who spotlight and signal boost it. They are as guilty for the people whose names and knowledge and lives have gone unheard and unsung as they are for creating it. But they will never be held accountable. Because as long as people like Yashar Ali and Cody Johnson have their way, they never can and they never will. Because what we consider canceled culture today would just be considered autistic screeching between two people tomorrow. At some point in time, we'll have to ask ourselves whether or not we actually give a shit about the very nature itself. Who knows? Who cares, right? It's not our problem until it becomes your problem. Until some woke skull Karen chooses to take it personally against you, chooses to destroy your life, destroy everything you built. Someone who doesn't even know who you are and couldn't care less. Because what mattered in the moment was not holding to the principles. What mattered in the moment was their emotions. Now and forever. Ad infinitum.